The one thing we all have too much of in our homes is paper. Half of it we haven't even asked for, but it builds and it grows in little piles dotted around our home and it adds to the clutter. In today's podcast, we are going to discuss 10 things you can declutter to keep your paper piles down.
You're listening to the Declutter Hub podcast, bringing you tried and tested, no-nonsense tips and advice from the leading experts in decluttering and organising your home. Now here are your hosts, Ingrid Jansen and Leslie Spellman.
Hello and welcome listeners, I'm Ingrid.
I'm Leslie.
If you're a brand new listener, thank you so much for being here, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our weekly podcast. And if you've been listening in for a while, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate you listening to us week by week. And today we are talking about the 10 things podcast, Leslie. We love it, 10 things. Our listeners know this. I think that we love it, 10 things. I think because it's a list. I like a list.
Yes, and today's list is all about paper. It's been a while since we've talked about paper, hasn't it? Now, paperwork in itself is a huge, momentous task, and so we cannot delve into the ins and outs of what you keep and what you don't keep. So what we thought is let's go for some standard no-brainers. That's what we love in our 10 things. And the light bulbs go on and people are like, yeah, that's me. Why have I got that? And it definitely spurs people into action. So 10 things you can declutter to keep your paper piles down. We need to keep that paper under control. So first things first, Ingrid, paper comes in through one of two ways. We either proactively bring it into our house, or it kind of comes in without us even wanting it there. And so before we talk about the things that we actively bring into our house, let's talk about the things that just arrive. Yeah.
I know. It's like you open your door or you open your post box. It's like, oh, what's all this stuff? Why do you put it in there? So yes, let's kick off this session with the things that come in that we haven't even asked for. And of course, a no-brainer is terms and conditions that come with other bits of paper that are important.
Yeah, so terms and conditions. Now, they typically come with financial documentation, and they come because they have to send them, because they have a legal obligation to send terms and conditions and all those details that you need, like what the kind of rate of, I don't know, APR is and all that kind of jazz. All that comes with those terms and conditions. And often we never read them, we never look at them, but we feel as if we ought to keep them because we might look at them at some point. But have you ever looked at them, Ingrid? Ever?
You know what, Leslie? I'm like, okay, what's important? Yeah, I need to keep that. And the rest, whoosh, go straight into the shredding or the recycling, Leslie. Because it's always like frequently asked questions. And I'm like, you'll be sending these to me every month, Probably once, way back when I read them once. But now it's like, oh, it's the same old all the time. It's these standard forms in different languages. And I'm like, I'm doing just fine. I don't need to have the form in 12 different languages that I read the same text. It is all the things you need to fill in, or the contract that they want you to take out for some maintenance. And I'm like, don't want that. If I would have wanted it, I will ask you for it. Straight into the recycling and the shredder.
Yeah, so we just call it blurb then. I think it's kind of blurb, isn't it, that comes with stuff.
Yeah.
And so now I'm not saying that these things are never useful, because sometimes they are, but if you did want to read terms and conditions and blurb, then there's a good chance that A, it's going to come again next month, or B, you can find that on a website somewhere or with a simple phone call. And it's a lot of stuff, isn't it, Ingrid? So number one on our list, really identify and think about that blurb that comes with mainly financial and utility-based documentation.
Yes. So let's move on to number 2, Leslie. And I know this is, a bugbear. I think of both of us, to be honest. Envelopes. When something arrives in the post, the first thing I do is I open the envelope and I discard the envelope into recycling. I do not want to keep a paper in an envelope but I can see it all the time. People open the thing, they read whatever it is, they put it back into the envelope, and then it goes onto a pile somewhere, onto a desk, in a plastic bag, randomly put down somewhere. But that envelope, it's another barrier against, what is this paperwork, and do I need to action it or file it or shred it or recycle it, whatever. It's a barrier.
Now, it's fair to say, Ingrid, that some people use envelopes as kind of like almost like a folder, like a mini folder, to containerize something and jot kind of useful information on the front of that. Now, the problem that we've really got with envelopes, because that would be useful, and it's certainly something I think generationally that people have done. So before, we had lots of nice pop wallets and file folders and L folders that we could file into. Perhaps an envelope was a useful way to keep the right kind of information together when we needed to keep more paper. But the problem that we've got now that we get so much paper on a daily, weekly, monthly basis is that every bit of that envelope is another 2 pieces of paper, 2 kind of sheets of paper that bulk out that paper, isn't it? So if we're talking about keeping those piles down, it's really something that you can use. We much prefer you to use L folders so they're see-through, they're transparent, you can put stickers on them with useful information, you can see exactly what's there, you can staple your information together as well, which we're big fans of. Get that stapler out and staple that paper together. You don't need an envelope because it's messy, it's ripped open, doesn't look great. All of these things are little barriers that are stopping you from getting the job done. Now, we have to wrench envelopes from people who have used envelopes for this purpose. They're kicking and screaming, I want to keep my envelopes. But what we're saying is we're not there to change your processes. But what we're talking about is think about the bulk that brings. Think about whether that's necessary and whether that's serving you well in your current life. So number 2, envelopes, Ingrid.
Yes, definitely, Leslie. And I would love to add one more thing to that. All the envelopes are normally either an A3 or an A4, and they're all white. So you can't see what paperwork it is. That's, I think, a big problem as well, is again that visibility. And that's, I think, why we're also a big fan of open it up, staple it together, throw away the envelope, and you can see what it is and where it needs to go and what action it deserves. So yes, envelopes need to go. Number 2, done. Let's move on to number 3, which is takeaway menus. Drawers and drawers full, we find, Leslie.
I know, because we're sort of tempted. There's a psychological thing, isn't it? You're like, oh, gosh, I might like a new piece. Oh, there's a new Thai place opened in town. I might order from there. Oh, there's a new Chinese. Let's keep that. Let's put it in the drawer. Let's put it in my junk drawer. Let's put it underneath my cutlery drawer. Let's put it in my in tray. Let's stick it on a pile of paper by the front door, because we might fancy that. Because there's something very tempting about marketing material about food. I mean, I fall for it as well. I'm like, yes, I would totally like that. Like, why not? But what we typically do then, and Ingrid, I'm not even going to include Ingrid in this conversation, because honestly, I would have more takeaways in a week than she would have in a year, if she has any at all. Probably the only takeaway she's ever had is when she's been at my house, to be fair. So she's not a takeaway gal, so she can't even contribute. You don't even contribute to this. And so, but everyone was with me like, yeah, that looks so nice. I totally want that. And so you keep those takeaway menus because you think you might fancy it, because you've fallen for the marketing at the bottom line. But do you need to keep that? Because actually what you typically do is think about where you want to go. You've probably got the number in the phone. You probably order the same thing every time you order anyway. Do you know what I mean? So we've got this standard kind of what we want to do and what we actually do. So those takeaway menus kind of clutter things up. And actually, we don't know whether they're good takeaways. The good takeaways probably don't need to send takeaway menus through the post and unsolicited mail. They've probably got enough business. So there's all kinds of things. But do yourself a favor and declutter some of those takeaway menus. If it's something that you use all the time, then there's a good reason to keep it, because it's quite nice to look through the menu in a different way. But it's something to really, really think about, because we find them everywhere, don't we, Ingrid? And they're definitely adding to our piles of paper clutter.
You know what? I'm like crying, laughing here, Leslie. I'm trying really hard not to laugh. I'm like nearly tearful because I'm laughing so hard. Because you're right. I have one takeaway menu in my house. One. And I think there's like 2 takeaway places we use, and the other one I use order online, and the other one I'm like, oh yeah, let me have a look. And I always order the same thing as well. It's like crazy. So I'm like laughing so hard here. But indeed, I do find them at my clients' houses, stacks and stacks of them, and it's such a nice, easy win. You know, let's declutter all the stuff of places that we've never used before. We're not gonna order. I mean, maybe you get a leaflet from a sushi place, but actually you realize I actually don't like sushi. Why have I got a takeaway menu from a sushi place? Let it go, thin it out, and let's be realistic about the things you do want to order and are actually going to eat. But you're right, Leslie, maybe I'm not the right person to ask here because, like I said, 1 takeaway menu in this house.
I mean, actually, to be fair, I'm not sure what we should talk to you about because you don't really like stuff. You don't really have much stuff at all. You know, thankfully, I'm here with an abundance of things coming into my house. So I can actually talk about decluttering because I actually do it. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, I remember I came to your house and they were like, Leslie's coming. We need to order a takeaway. It's a treat. And I'm like, it's not a treat because I literally have a takeaway every week in my house. But anyway, we digress. And I very much look forward to the next takeaway that I have at your house when I come and visit, Ingrid.
No, I'm going to cook now for you next time.
Good. Yeah, when you come to our house, we always go out. But anyway, right. Number 4 is, and this is one that's actually on the decline already, Ingrid.
Yeah.
But we do see them hanging around, don't we?
Yes, it is yellow pages and phone directories and things like that. Thank goodness they're not really coming in anymore. Just now, suddenly every couple of years, like, oh, there's one. But we indeed find them in like the most random places. They're like in cupboards in living rooms or suddenly in a cupboard under the stairs, or they come from under something. It's like, oh, there's one. But they are super bulky. I mean, in the past, they were like hundreds and hundreds of pages. They are getting thinner. They're getting smaller, which is good. But still, when was the last time you used a phone directory to find a telephone number? Even if you still have them from previous years, you're not going to use that. You're going to ask recommendations. You're going to look online. You're going to maybe post a question in on your Facebook page and say, hi, I'm looking for such and such company. Does anybody have a recommendation? And then you can just Google everything. I can't even remember the time I used a phone directory, Leslie, to find out anything.
Well, that's because you haven't got one.
Yeah.
That's one reason.
Yeah, but even when back in the day, when we still got one every year, I'm like, oh gosh, it's time again. They put one through my mailbox. Okay, it can be decluttered because I never ever use it.
Yeah, I can't remember actually getting one in the last 5 years here. So I think they're on the decline. But what we're talking about really is if you've got them still hanging around in your house from the olden days, it was called the olden days, think about whether or not that's something that you actually use, because that's a lot of paper. I mean, it's kind of a book, kind of a reference thing, but it is something that's unsolicited mail. And who knows, Ingrid, in other parts of the world, they might still come through those doors. You know, you made me a little bit nostalgic there, thinking about the kind of yellow pages and going through the phone book. I can still remember my childhood phone number, can you? 63249. Because you just remember it, don't you? But actually, there's only 2 mobile phone numbers that I can physically remember, and that's my husband and my best friend, and that's because they've had the same mobile phone number since the beginning of time, and somehow they must have been the 2 people that I rang back in the day. But other than, I don't know my kids' phone numbers off by heart. I don't know your phone number off by heart, even though I'm ringing you all the time. I know my own as well, actually, which is useful, I suppose. Mm-hmm. But yeah, do you know your old childhood phone number?
Yeah.
What is it?
0299320532.
Oh, yes.
I can't say that in English. I have to do that in Dutch because I can't, you know what I mean? It's like, so yeah, that's still my mom's phone number. So that's the one I can remember.
Yeah.
So please don't do this slowly and I'll start ringing my mom because she's going to be really confused.
Still a number? Is it still a number? Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realise it was still a number. She's going to get loads of random small of there. Hi, I know English. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, tell us if you remember your childhood phone number. I mean, 63249 might still be a valid number, but it's definitely not my number. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
So you're now going to have somebody else like who crank calls to your house then.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Okay. We digress, of course, as always. But now we need to go to number 5.
Yeah.
Ingrid, number 5.
Yes, receipts, receipts. I know. We find piles and stacks, and they're everywhere. In purses, in bags, in handbags, stuffed somewhere into a corner. And these receipts are just like no-brainers. You can recycle them, or you can let them go, throw them away, put them in the shredders, do something with them. You do not need to keep a receipt of a coffee that you've bought with your friend this morning in your local coffee shop. Honestly.
Yes. Oh, you sound quite fierce with that, Ingrid. You sound quite determined to get your point across. There are, of course, some receipts that you do need to keep, and you will know what they are. But what we're saying is be more discerning with the receipts that you keep, because if you then, reduce the number of receipts you've got, the ones that you've got are a little bit more meaningful and useful. Meaningful's like the wrong word with a receipt, but useful then. Yeah. And so really think that through, because we've got in the habit of the years. It's like a generational thing again, isn't it, Ingrid, where we're like, oh, we need to keep the receipt and we need to check it against our bank. But are we doing that? If you do that, great. But once you've checked that everything is in order, discard the receipt. Now, there used to be a time where you couldn't recycle receipts because it was on thermal paper, but now that's all changing, and you can recycle standard thermal receipt paper, the ones that come out of those machines as well. So that's good news as well, because you didn't used to be able to, so they all had to get kind of thrown away, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, receipts are definitely in our firing line because we see so many of them and they are there for years and years and years. Now, I do have a box of receipts. I have like a box file of receipts that I've kept. Some of them I've had for 20, 30 years, which are things that, big, high value items that I know might be useful for insurance purposes and things like that. So we're not saying discard every receipt, but as Ingrid says, when you've done your weekly shopping, when you've been to Costa Coffee, you don't need to keep that receipt necessarily.
Yeah.
Do yourself a favor and decrease those receipts.
Yeah, I think it's all about the intention, isn't it? Like, for example, we're doing some online grocery shopping at the moment. So when it arrives, we immediately check the paperwork against the stuff, if it's all arrived, and if there's anything that we're missing and we need to buy later somewhere else or whatever. So we take that action immediately. But when I pop across the road to my little Tesco's and I get a pint of milk, I don't even get the receipt out because we're so used to, in the past it came out automatically, and now the machine, thank goodness, asks you, do you want a receipt? And I'm like, no, don't want a receipt. And I think it's so helpful because you just create jobs and paperwork for yourself if you don't do anything with that. Of course, I completely agree with you, Leslie. Of course, there are receipts that you need to keep, but the bulk you don't. So even try not to get it in the first place if you can, to save you another pile of stuff somewhere in your house.
Are clothes your downfall when it comes to clutter? Do you open your wardrobe every single day but never have anything to wear? Well, we have just the thing for you. Starting on Monday, the 16th of May, we have a Clear Out Your Clothes challenge. Daily live sessions, expert advice, motivation, inspiration, and a specific action plan to make sure you've only got clothes you love and wear. All the details are on declutterhub.com/clear out. So welcome back, everybody. Now, before the break, we talked a lot about the paper that comes into our house that we don't even ask for. And now we're going to talk about the things that you do actually kind of ask for that we can actually declutter too. So Ingrid, let's jump straight in with number 6.
Yes, it is magazines and subscriptions. We love a magazine, don't we? We either have subscriptions on them, or when we do our weekly shop, we kind of browse that lovely aisle with all those shiny kind of lovely magazines. We think, ooh, what do I fancy and what do I want? And we pick up a couple. And then we come home and we put them on a pile somewhere or in a reading basket or on the table somewhere. And we think, we're going to sit down and have a nice little read of this magazine. And then life gets in the way. Other things need to be done first. And all these magazines start to kind of build up. Or they come in through the post in this beautiful plastic wrapper to protect it from the rain and the wind. And they never get unpacked because we never get around to reading the magazine, or we only read 2 articles and then it gets kind of put to the side to come back to another time.
We kind of like the idea of it, don't we? We like the idea of relaxing with a nice magazine. It's kind of a habit, isn't it? And it's not necessarily a bad habit. Do you know what I mean? It's a nice habit to read through a magazine, but it's really about evaluating your behaviors when it comes to magazines and making sure they are kind of aligned. And so we need to really think about, are we actually reading the magazine, or is it, as Ingrid said, coming in every week in that plastic wrapper and never getting opened? If you're more, if you read the magazines and then declutter them, fantastic. But, think about decluttering and not keeping them, because that information in magazines gets recycled all the time. The recipes get recycled, the article gets recycled. We know because we write those articles for magazines and we get asked to write the same old stuff over and over. We don't get asked for something new and revolutionary about decluttering. We get asked for simple stuff on decluttering. Those articles will come round again and you'll be able to read them and be inspired. If you do see something amazing in a magazine that you want to keep, just clip that out, but make sure that you're going to do something with it. Really, really important not to just clip things from magazines just in case. Now, if you are that person who you've got things on subscription, but you're never quite getting round to them, is now the time to actually cease that subscription and stop that paper from actually coming into your house. Save yourself a little bit of money. You can always resubscribe if you miss it, or you can always go to the shop and buy it if it's the kind of magazine that you can buy from a shop instead. But really think about this, because we honestly might see 36, 40, 45 magazines in a big pile still in that plastic wrapper waiting for a rainy day. And it's adding to your paper piles and adding to your clutter, isn't it?
Yeah. And I must admit, Leslie, what I really appreciate. So my son reads the National Geographic and he's done it for years and he loves it and he reads it. So that's why we still have that subscription. I'm really pleased to say that they actually got rid of the plastic wrapper and it's now in a paper wrapper. And that makes me so much more happy, because that thin plastic is just so tricky to recycle. So that it's now on paper, I think is really, really good. So I think hopefully we're going to get away from all those plastic wrappers. But even if it's in a paper wrapper and you don't read it, ask yourself, do I actually want this subscription or not? Am I just wasting money on something that I never get around to reading? And that's such a waste, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right. And that with the plastic wrapping, but a lot of the plastic now is compostable, recyclable plastic as well, that you can put in your compost bin and stuff. So yeah, I think that it is biodegradable or whatever the term is. And so I think even they've started to work out that plastic scenario is not great. I mean, we get I think it's the National Trust, who you would expect, to be fair, to do something sustainable as well. Yeah. So, but there's still a lot of plastic out there as well. Yeah. So yeah, magazines that you have read, magazines that you're not reading, and ideally, if you're not reading them at all, do yourself a favour and cancel your subscriptions.
Yes.
Okay, Ingrid. We're on to number 7, motoring through our 10 things, aren't we?
Yes.
I like this one, actually.
Okay, you start then, because I know you love this one. Go for it.
I do. We see everyone loves a bit of a list. Well, not everyone. A lot of people love a list, and we like to jot things. We like to jot our thoughts down. We like to jot down lists of chores, lists of things that we need to do. Some people like to journal. Some people like to chronicle their day. But if you're a writer of lists, then you know who you are. But what we find quite a lot is those lists that people write on a daily, weekly, regular basis hang around quite a lot, don't they, Ingrid? And so you love a list, I love a list, but I will discard my old lists all the time because I'm kind of a decluttering kind of person. So I'm like, why would I want loads of scribbled out list of things that I've done, or in fact, loads of things that I haven't done that I'll just put into a nicer, brand spanking new, nicely written list rather than a horrible looking list with only half of it done. And so if you are a list person and you keep all those old lists, then it's time to get rid of them. You don't need those lists. They either need to be transferred over to a new list or they need to be discarded completely. So shopping lists, chore lists, to-do lists, we see them everywhere, don't we, Ingrid?
Especially on old envelopes, Leslie.
Yes.
Yeah. There we go. There they are again, the old envelopes. And it's really then tricky to keep track, because old envelopes that are ripped open already look messy from themselves. And if it's then half scribbled lists on there, it's really then tricky to keep track of that information. So you're better off at maybe going to a notebook that is bound together, so you don't have loose bits of paper everywhere. Because when people start to scribble on tiny little pieces of paper, post-it notes, things everywhere, it's like, I don't, where's the list? What's happening? What's coming and what's going? And then it gets really random. It's better to use a notebook and where you can keep track. And then when the list is done, discard the list. Thin out that notebook as soon as you kind of done, like, okay, this list is gone. Rip it out, move on to the next thing, because then you don't have stacks and stacks of old notebooks then that you have to go through again to see where's that one phone number that you wrote down on a tiny piece of paper somewhere.
Says the woman who's got loads and loads of old notebooks and lists that she's not discarded.
No, that is not true, Leslie. I'm going to stop you in your tracks here. The notebooks that I keep are notebooks with things that, like, from training, conferences and things that I've done and I've attended, that is knowledge. If it's my normal to-do list or a normal kind of list, I rip them out all the time and I discard them immediately.
Okay, I'll let you off then. You got me. Because it's just that every time I want to know something, because I've decluttered it before I've even done it half the time, because all I love doing is getting things off my list. So I'm always like, yeah, but didn't we talk about that a couple of weeks ago? And she's like, wait a minute, I will consult my list. I'm like, how many lists have you got there? Do you know what I mean? Of course, we don't work together, so we're always working. So I don't know what goes on below, chest height. I don't see the desk and the actual notebooks. And so I take it back. I apologize profusely, Ingrid.
No, that's all right. All right. We have to get our facts straight to make sure that our listeners don't think I'm like buried in paper. Like, I mean, you can see it on YouTube. I mean, you can only see a tiny little square. I mean, maybe outside of this little screen, my whole desk is a tip, but I can calm everybody down. It's all, I've got everything here in a neat little.
So this is my notebook. My list notebook. So that's a few things that I did yesterday that I've scribbled through. And the only reason that's still there is because I'm on this page for today's new list. Good. And then I will, as soon as I've done that, I'll transfer it over to the next day, the things that I've not done, because there is always loads of things that I've not done. At least 30% of them won't get done today. Yeah. And then I'll transfer it onto the next day and I'll rip out that piece of paper.
Perfect.
So I've got a nice empty notebook.
I know, this is my little, I use like one of those kind of journalist kind of recorder notebooks that I love, that are only like on the top there together. So I use this list, this is my daily thing. And I now need to, I have an old list going that I need, this looks horrible. So I need to transfer 2 or 3 things that are still on there on my new list. So yeah.
Just think, if you're not watching us on YouTube, what you're missing. You're missing such fascinating visuals of mine and Ingrid's notebooks. So if you're listening rather than watching us on YouTube, we do apologize. Okay, number 8, Ingrid.
Yes.
I had to look.
Yes, it's a good one, I think. It's leaflets from goodie bags. So we go out for the day. I mean, it can even, it can be, I don't know, the Ideal Home Show. It can be a trade show. It can be even to a museum or to Madame Tussauds or whatever. We go out for the day. We pick up information, leaflets, things that we think, oh, that looks interesting. And then we come home and we keep it in the bag, or we keep it and we're like, oh, let's keep these leaflets for another time. Those need to be decluttered, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. So there's kind of goodie bags where it's a kind of goodie bag that's been put together by somebody else to give you en masse. But then we have bags that we take with us that we fill with these leaflets. And so it's kind of leaflets in bags. I think that's what we're trying to say. Leaflets in bags and piles, So definitely, even when you're on the tube and someone thrusts something in your hand, don't they? And like, oh, look at this. And, whatever that might be. Do you need to keep those things? But typically we do keep hold of them. And that's something that can absolutely go. So if you've had things from a goodie bag, look at that. If you come back from a conference, a trade show, whatever, somewhere that you're out and about, a museum, look at those things that you've got and say, what am I going to do with this information? If I really am going to do something with that information, it needs to go into an in-tray. It needs to go somewhere where you're going to action it. It needs to get, captured in digital format, if that's your thing. You need to do something that's going to make you do something with that information proactively, rather than just leave it sitting there, because you're never probably going to randomly remember, oh yeah, there's that goodie bag that I got back in 2017 from the Museum of blah, blah. And I'm going to go back and think about that leaflet that, you're not going to do that.
No.
And so you need to take action quickly on these things, or discard them. So this is where realism kicks in, isn't it, Ingrid?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's another one, Leslie. I want to move on to number 9. Another one that we kind of get given cards is when you go like to the dentist or the doctor or the hairdresser or something like that. At the end, they're like, would you like to book your next appointment? And you're like, oh, yes, please. And they, before you can even kind of go, let me just look at my phone. They're like whipping these little cards out, these little appointment cards, and they write it down, the date and the time, and they want to give it to you. And I'm like, I don't want it because I immediately going to put it in my phone. But all these little cards kind of get then lost in a bag, in a purse, in your coat, pocket or whatever. And it's like, what is this now again? So, orthodontist again. My kids both go to the orthodontist. They do it as well, and it's just like, I don't want anything. I've got it in my phone. It's all good. I don't want to keep this.
I think it's fair to say you have to have a solid digital calendar to enable you not to take those appointment cards. Am I right? Or you need to have a very solid system of taking those appointment cards and putting them on a paper calendar. So most people, if they're using a paper-based calendar, will have either their phone, if they're out and about, this is, either their phone or a little mini kind of diary or something that they would jot things into. Or that diary might be at home, or their digital calendar might be at home. And so it's more about thinking about, do I need a duplicate? So we're not saying you don't need those appointment cards, because some people, if you're not digitally based or if you've not got a solid system for your diary, do need those cards. But don't take it if you don't need it. If you're happy that it's in your phone, try and get in there before they actually write those cards, because it's just wasting paper that we don't need to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and they hang around, and sometimes we do keep them, and then we find them on notice boards 2-3 years down the line. We find them, in paperwork, medical paperwork. We'll find appointment cards as well, and they're just something that you don't need after the event.
Yeah. Or I think, Leslie, maybe then the compromise is, if you do need to take it because you have to transfer it to your calendar, make a note to go, I'm going to take this, I'm going to go home, I'm going to write it on my calendar, either on my wall calendar, in the computer, or whatever it is, because maybe you don't want to put it in your phone there, and then when you're kind of feel that you're holding up the line or something, but then immediately discard that little card. So it's a task done. So don't kind of put it down and think, I'll look at it another time. Do the action and then recycle it. So to save you the job of having to handle that paperwork yet again.
Yes, absolutely. And that leads us nicely on to number 10, the last thing in our 10 things to declutter to keep your paper piles down. That's quite a bit of a mouthful, that, isn't it, really? But anyway, it kind of captures what we're trying to talk about. And this is for people who are doing projects at home mainly. And so if you are doing a project on your house, a DIY project, you're getting a new bathroom, getting a new kitchen, getting some new curtains, a new carpet, whatever that might be, typically we do research and we look for ideas, and we buy brochures, we pick things up as we're going along so we can leaf through at our leisure, and then we do the project, and we still have all of these things hanging around, don't we, Ingrid?
Oh yes, I see it, when my clients have done garden projects or paint projects, and they've got all the samples and they've got all of the leaflets from the different companies, and then they've chosen one company to go ahead with. It's all in progress, it's all going fine, and then the project is finished, but then they keep all of the other companies that they haven't used in case in the future they might do a project like that again. And I'm like, that makes no sense. It's going to be probably years before you're going to do a similar kind of project, and by that time all the equipment, all the materials have changed, the products have changed, the pricing has changed. There's no point in keeping all of the stuff that you haven't used, haven't chosen. You've committed to one thing. Keep those things probably for your reference, so you know which builder you've used and which fabric it was, etc. But everything else can go.
Yes, absolutely. So, Ingrid,
yeah,
I have nothing else to add. We have done our 10 things. And so that's actually, if you go through these things and you find some of these things dotted around, that's really going to take these paper piles down, isn't it, Ingrid?
Yes, because this is all the random stuff that is everywhere. So we hope that these 10 things are super helpful for you. So that's it for this podcast. Let me tell you what is coming up next week. And I am absolutely delighted because I am interviewing Hazel Thornton. She has written a book that says, "What's a photo without the story?" So I'm going to talk to her about genealogy and photos and family kind of research and all of those kinds of things. So I'm super excited to share that podcast with you next week. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks so much for listening to the Declutter Hub podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us in your podcast player so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you next week.